Welcome to Granite's Edge, a Republican-led legislative action program bringing information to our residents of Pelham and New Hampshire. News about legislation that's happening right now in our state capital of Concord that will affect you. Why are we called Granite's Edge? Our small town of Pelham, New Hampshire is located on the southern border of our wonderful Granite state, so we're right on the edge. And as all of you know, that edge is exactly what we have over others. Granite's Edge. In this program, we'll take a dive into some of the most important legislation of this session. We'll talk to legislators about the challenges in our state and about the committees they serve on. And every month, we'll have a special guest, someone who's an expert in their field who will bring you the truth about important topics that are linked to important legislation that may affect your liberty and freedom. Your host today is Herschel Nunez, an elected state representative right here from Pelham, New Hampshire, who thinks it's important that you know what the legislators know. So stay tuned. We have a great show for you today.
Good morning and welcome to Granite's Edge. We're back for our third installment this month, and we just want to thank everybody for all the views on Facebook, all the views on YouTube. And I know that it's in rotation. Granite's Edge is on the local access channels here, so thank you to all of you who are watching the show. We appreciate the opportunity to bring these messages to you as we talk about the legislative action that's going on up in Concord. Today we've got a really special show. We have another legislator from here in Hillsborough 37 District, Representative Tony Lekas. He's going to talk to us today about some of the gun control bills that have been offered to the House, to the Senate, to the legislature this year, and what some of those bills mean. Also on the show today, we have Ms. Susan Olsen. She is the Director of Legislation and Advocacy for the Women's Defense League. As you see today, I'm wearing pearls. That's right, I'm wearing pearls. And we have a story about those pearls that are going to come from her later on in the show. So for now, we're going to start up with Representative Tony Lekas, and we're going to talk about some of the bills that are coming through. How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Tony, just because you and I are both first-time legislators, can you give an introduction to yourself to the folks out there that are viewing so that they'll know who you are, where you live, things like that, and let them know about how you serve in the legislature?
Okay. About 35 years ago, in 1984, I got married and we purchased a home in Hudson, and we still live there. So we've been around for a while. And I've followed politics in the town and in the state, during that time, and gone up to the State House to testify on bills. And with a number of openings, decided it was time for us to step up. It's actually I and my wife, Alicia Lekas, Representative Alicia Lekas, are serving in the legislature. And for me, I'm still working a full-time job. I have some flexibility in work, so I can take time off for session days. But I'm not able to spend as much time as I'd like. My wife has more time, and I support her in doing that. She's very busy on the Education Committee. I mean, being a state representative in New Hampshire is basically, it's a volunteer public service job, and the representatives do spend a lot of time, working for their constituents in the district.
They do. We all have many obligations up there. Some legislators are able to serve more. They get assigned to committees, they get assigned to commissions, things of that nature. But a lot of people have to work. They've got to bring home the bacon. So you're still able to work out that schedule with your employer so that you can be there for those important days, the session days, when we have the floor votes.
Right, I am able to do that, and then I spend a fair amount of time doing homework, reviewing the bills and deciding how I'll vote and doing other things, related to the job, not when I'm in Concord.
Well, we have you on the program today because you are yourself, you're an NRA instructor, correct?
I'm an NRA training counselor, which means I'm an instructor, but I also train people to be firearms instructors.
And the part of our program today that we're going to talk about is about the gun legislation that has been offered to the legislature this year, presented by the majority, which is the left majority. And some of those challenges that were inside the bills and where the bills stand right now. So I want to just start moving into some of that conversation if we can.
Sure.
Let's start with House Bill 564. This House bill came into the legislature and then was amended, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And this bill has to do with firearms on a school campus. So let's talk about what that means and where this bill went and how it wound up and what's supposed to happen to it.
Okay. What a lot of people don't realize is that in New Hampshire, it's perfectly legal for someone to carry a concealed firearm in the school around school grounds. Under federal law, they have to have a license to carry valid in that state. And that's been true all along, and there are people who do, parents, staff, and teachers who do that. I've actually trained teachers and staff who carry in the public schools. And that hasn't been a problem, and not only that, those people are there in case someone decided to attack the students in the school, they're in place to at least have a chance of defending the students. So what this bill does is it prohibits people carrying firearms on school grounds or in the school unless they have written permission from the school board. And my view is that creates just another area that's defenseless. Even if you have a resource officer who's armed, he can only be in one place at one time. It's obvious who he is, and if someone means to do harm, he'll be the first one they'll go after. And at that point, the students have no defense left.
What type of inflection does this make on parents who want to take their kids to school? What does this do to the drop-off and pick-up portion of getting your children to school if you're someone who carries a firearm?
Well, the bill appears to allow people to have a firearm in their vehicle when they are going to drop off or pick up their child. But in practice, it almost doesn't. The firearm can only be in the vehicle. It has to be in a locked vehicle. That means if it's on your person, let's say in a holster, either you can't get out of the car to get your child or help them get into the car or anything like that, or you'd actually have to take the firearm out of the holster and put it somewhere else. And that's actually, handling the firearm out of the holster is an area where there is some risk. And in that sense, this bill actually could make things less safe.
So doesn't the amendment state that the car had to remain locked if the firearm was in it?
Right, which actually makes the whole thing not work. I mean, in theory, you could be in your car locked with your firearm, but you're not permitted to unlock the car even to let your child in or out of the car. So, I mean, it really doesn't work.
The part of the bill says that the school board has the authorization to determine who may or may not carry on campus, correct?
That's correct. There's one other exception, which is for on-duty law enforcement or military. So I suppose if you had, a policeman could come in armed without permission. But other than that, yes, the school board has to provide written permission.
Do we think that the school boards have enough knowledge and training to understand who they should be allowing to have a firearm or not?
I would think not.
That sounds like a question from the well, doesn't it? Does this bill actually do anything to stop criminal activity around the school?
No, as a matter of fact, it makes it easier for a criminal who intends to cause harm in the school, because they can be confident that, unless there's a police officer there who's usually going to be uniformed and they'll know who it is, there's nobody with a firearm to stop them.
All right, so this is really about restricting rights of legal firearm owners, of the people who are trying to do the right thing, people who support the Second Amendment, who have chosen to carry firearms to protect their families, to protect their children. This is very restrictive in that manner.
It is. I mean, this and the rest of these bills, but for this one, it just makes it more difficult to own and carry a firearm. There's many of us who carry a firearm as part of our daily life. It's not, it's there just in case something goes wrong. I mean, I have a 200-plus-year-old farmhouse. I have several good industrial fire extinguishers in there. I certainly hope to never have to use them, but, it's a good idea to have them. Similarly with a firearm, I hope I don't have to use it to defend myself, but I have it just in case. It's just being prepared. And the problem is, for people that do carry regularly, having exceptions causes a lot of problems. Either you'll inadvertently carry where it's not legal, or you have to go through some process of either not carrying when you're going to pick up or drop off your child, or do something, be taking the firearm out of the holster, which is less safe. This bill just has, causes problems and doesn't really do any good.
So the other thing is this bill also passed through the House and passed through the Senate.
It hasn't gone through the Senate. It's gone through the Senate committee. I checked last night. It has not yet had a vote on the floor of the Senate.
Okay. So we're still waiting for that vote on the floor of the Senate.
Right. And then since the Senate, assuming it passes the Senate, since the Senate amended it, it'll come back to the House. My guess is what they'll try and do is just have a voice vote on concurrence with the Senate changes, but maybe we won't let that happen.
And from there, it goes through the process of reaching the governor's desk.
Correct.
And we'll talk more about the governor in a little bit.
All right.
Let's move on to our next bill. This next bill that I want to talk about with you is about protective orders for vulnerable adults. This is HB 696. Yep. This bill, to me, seemed more about the confiscation of firearms than it did about vulnerable adult care. I was able to attend the House committee hearing on this bill, and Susan Olsen, who's going to be here with us later to talk about some of this as well, I was able to sit with her during a major portion of this hearing. And, we counted the number of times that the sponsors of this bill talked about the vulnerable adults, talked about things that could happen to them. And we also counted the number of times that they talked about firearms. And the number of times that they talked about firearms greatly outweighed the number of times that they talked about how we can assist adults who may be in danger, vulnerable adults, the elderly that may be in danger, or people who are vulnerable in their homes. So let's start off with this about talking about some part of how this legislation is drafted, giving ex parte permission.
Right. What this does is someone can just make a claim, and it could be, the supposed vulnerable adult, it could be their guardian, there's a number of other people who are able to do this, and they just have to make a claim that they feel they're under threat. There is a supposed penalty if it turns out they're lying about it, but there's other things like this, but experience shows that these sort of laws, that people who do lie and make false claims are never prosecuted for it. So there's no deterrent. Someone could just have an issue with the other person and decide to, cause them trouble and make this claim. And then the ex parte part is that while there's some notification of the defendant, the person that the protective order would be against, there's no requirement that they be at the hearing. There explicitly says that the normal rules of evidence don't have to be followed. And so it's the accuser and the judge deciding what's going to happen to someone.
Isn't there something in this bill that says that the judge can give permission by phone?
The judge can do that. The thing can either be filed by phone. The judge can also do the order by phone. I mean, their idea is there's an immediate threat, and so they want to make it quick and easy to protect someone. The problem is this also makes it quick and easy to violate a number of people's rights, both their Second Amendment rights and others.
Well, and there's a conflict here with due process, right?
There is
Shouldn't you be able to efface your accuser if you're accused of something?
Yes, there's almost no due process in here. They're going to notify you, but you don't have to be there for it. Lots of things can go on where you're not involved in it.
Also, if one of these orders are issued, it places restraints on a defendant's right to purchase a firearm.
Right. Not only it puts restraints on their ability to purchase a firearm, they're required to surrender any license to carry they have, and they're required to relinquish their firearms to the police.
And what happens with those firearms? Where are they taken?
Wherever the police choose to store them. The problem is it explicitly absolves the police of any responsibility if the firearms are damaged while they're stored.
So they literally can just throw them in a locker and it doesn't matter what happens to that firearm afterwards.
Right. And typically if they're not cared for, it's not in a controlled environment. If nothing else, they can be scratched up, rust, and have other problems. If
not dismantled.
Right.
When can the defendant get his firearm back?
After the order is gone, the defendant actually has to go to court and have a hearing to request that they get their firearms back. And they're going to do a background check on them and other checks to make sure it's legal for them to own the firearms. But they actually have to go to court, and that, for a lot of people, you have to take 1 or more days off of work. If you're going to have legal representation, you have to pay for it. It's an onerous process to get them back.
And isn't the defendant required to pay for the storage?
Yes.
Of the firearm when it's confiscated? You're immediately accruing a bill with the police department.
Correct. And it just says it has to be the actual cost, but there's no limit on what it might be.
And there's also no limit on a time frame of when an instance is reported. Isn't the bill unclear about the time frames? Could something have happened between the two parties, say last year, and then the accuser says, well, now I'm going to take care of this. Now I'm going to call the cops and have your firearms taken away from you.
That's correct. There's another thing to think about in this bill. I mean, people who support it claim they want to protect vulnerable individuals, which presumably are either elderly, people who have mental issues, or other things who are living in the same place with someone else. But the thing is, for someone to threaten or harm such a people, they certainly do not need firearms. That person's vulnerable already. I mean, just physical force with your hands or other weapons would be easy. So this claims to try and protect those people, but taking the firearms away really does nothing to protect them. All it does is infringe on the rights without due process of the owner of the firearms.
There are some penalties that are inside this bill as well. Penalties for the defendant, the person who's accused,
yep.
And not so much. I don't quite have a clear understanding of what happens if the accuser is proved that they were wrong in their accusation. Is there any type of penalty that goes toward that? Or maybe we can come back to this with Ms. Olsen. She may have the answer on that.
I mean, that's probably a good idea. There is a supposedly a penalty, but
I think it's an unbalanced penalty.
It is unbalanced, and in effect, the prosecutor would have to choose to prosecute for that. And experience shows. I mean, there are things like domestic disputes and other situations where people can get restraining orders or other kinds of protective orders. And the experience is that even if someone makes a clearly false accusation, they never get prosecuted for it. So as a practical matter, there is no deterrent against doing this.
Well, let's move on to our next bill. Thanks for covering that with me. The next one we're going to talk about is HB 109. This bans private transfer of firearms. Now, we know that gun shows come around, and sometimes in the gun shows, people do barter and trade for firearms, person to person there.
Yep.
What does this do to that, the way that we can do that? We can do that now. What does this bill do to that situation?
Today, you can sell a firearm to someone else as long as they live in the same state. That's a federal law, and there's someone who's known to you. What this does is if you have a couple of friends that run into each other at a gun show, and one decides to sell a firearm to the other one wants to buy it, just because they were at the discussion occurred at a gun show, they're now required to go to a firearms dealer and pay them to do the background check and do the transfer through that process. Today, they agree on a price. One hands over the cash, the other one hands over the firearm. And the problem here is, it's even if it was discussed at the gun show and the transfer occurs later. Well, if you and a friend happen to be at a gun show at the same time, who's to say you didn't have some discussion about, purchasing a firearm at that show? Mm-hmm. So you could be accused of violating this law if you don't do it, the transfer through a gun shop.
Background checks within this bill, they're already done, aren't they? Background checks are done for people who purchase firearms.
If you purchase a firearm from a federal firearms dealer, they're required to do a background check. Now, most of the sellers that have tables at gun shows are firearms dealers, and they in fact do the background checks. I mean, it's only, a person-to-person transfer of, people there. And even today, under this law today, if you're going to sell a firearm, you meet someone there who you don't know, and you want to sell a firearm to them and they agree to purchase it, for a handgun, at least under state law, either they have to be known to you or they have to show you their New Hampshire pistol or revolver license. So even today, it's not legal to sell it to a complete stranger.
I was doing some research this morning and on this topic, on this bill, and I found out that that there was a survey taken of inmates, and that less than 1% of inmates, less than 1%, actually acquired a firearm. These are inmates that were accused and convicted of a criminal offense that includes a firearm. Yep. Less than 1% purchased their firearm at a gun show, and that they admitted that most of it was on the black market. So does any of this bill do anything to thwart black market sales?
The answer is no. This is just another bill that is just to make life more difficult for gun owners. I mean, I think there are people who clearly don't want private individuals to own firearms, and they'll do everything they can to make it more difficult to dissuade them from doing it. That's the only thing this is going to accomplish.
And another thing that is inside this bill is that it creates a gun registry, and that's prohibited by federal law.
I believe the federal law prohibits the federal government from doing it. I don't know that it prohibits states from doing it. But I mean, that would be, a clear violation of our rights. I mean, part of the reason for owning firearms is to act as a deterrent against government becoming tyrannical. And if they have a registry of firearms, that makes that a lot less effective.
Yes, it does. It does. Okay, let's move along. We've still got a couple more bills to cover here. Yep. Okay, so now I'm going to go to HB 687. Okay. This is an extreme risk order bill that was held in committee. It also had an ex parte drafting in the legislation, which is basically a one-sided interest, of course. That again allowed no due process. But this bill was held off in committee. It was retained.
Right. The House committee retained it, but they can bring it back next year.
So they're going to save this one.
They have saved it. They'll have to do something with it. Either the House committee will recommend that it be passed, maybe amend it, maybe not, or they could recommend that it's it not be passed, and then the House will have to vote on it. But it's going to come back.
Yeah, I think it will come back.
It has to.
Next session.
It has to.
Yep. Okay. Now,
I wanted to say one other thing about this. Not only
sure.
it has all the same problems as the vulnerable person one about no due process, violating rights. People can make accusations that are false and in effect have no consequences. The other thing to realize is if you're concerned about one person threatening another, firearms, removing firearms again doesn't provide any effective protection. looking at the FBI crime statistics, about 1/3 of all murders occur with not involving firearms at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, knives or, fists or, various other things.
Or even hammers.
Yeah, it's called blunt trauma. There's a number of them that are like that. So the issue isn't the tool that somebody uses to harm someone or to threaten them. The issue is this person is supposedly harming or threatening somebody, and that's illegal. There are already laws against threatening or harming someone else, and those go through the normal criminal justice system where it has to be proved and there is due process. This bill isn't going to effectively protect anyone. And again, it just makes life more difficult for firearms owners and violates their rights.
Let's move on from 687. HB 514, which is a bill that was put through, imposes a 7-day waiting period, which is really 11 days if you're counting weekends that it takes. These are 7 business days waiting period. This session in the legislature, you stepped up to the well to debate and or tell a story, and it was so eloquently given. The entire House was silent while you were talking, and it refers to why this could be a bad idea. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? I think it involved a couple of different people, or there may be 2 stories, but could you tell us a little bit about that and about this bill and why it's so important that this doesn't happen?
Sure. As I said, I'm a firearms instructor. Among other things, I teach personal protection classes, and over the years I've had a number of students who are women who ended up in a situation where they had somebody they were in a relationship with, who they don't want to be in it anymore, and that person isn't taking no and is harassing and threatening them. They can go and get a restraining order, but as most people know, restraining order is a piece of paper. If that person who's a threat is really, sensible, reasonably sensible and sane, it might cause them to leave them alone. But if not, if they're a real threat, it's going to do nothing or just make them more angry. I've actually had women referred to me by police when they got a restraining order and the police tell them, we can't be there all the time to protect you. You need to be able to protect yourself. So in this particular case, there's a friend of mine who's out of state, who is friends with a woman in state who had been married, had a child, she got divorced, and her ex-husband was making threatening comments against her. She actually went through a program in the state where you can actually hide your address. It's not on your driver's license or other documents. She had a restraining order, but she felt she was under threat and needed to defend herself. So I got together with her and ran her through a class on introduction to firearms. I mean, she had shot a firearm once many years ago just to try it. Helped her find a holster that she could carry regularly concealed with, and she did very well in those classes. The problem was she was actually quite poor. She's a single mom trying to support a daughter, and so she went off and was going to try and save up the money, or my friend was going to try and get people to help her, pay for a firearm. What I found out after that is that there was a further, more immediate threatening statement made by her ex-husband in front of their young daughter, and she was, more concerned. So actually, it was after a session day. Alicia and I drove up to her home, and I lent her a handgun ammunition, the holster, and a lockbox so she could keep it safely at home, so that she could defend herself if necessary. I mean, if she were harmed or her daughter were harmed only because she didn't have enough money to buy a firearm, I would have felt terrible, and I wanted to do everything I could to help her. The problem is, if this law were in place, it would have been illegal for me to do that. Actually, this goes to 109 as well. Not only would it have been, there would have had to have been the waiting period, but she would have had to go to a gun store and pay to have the transfer done. We would have had to have gotten together at some time when a gun store was open. And during that period, she could have been killed potentially by her ex-husband.
Well, I know that that story meant a whole lot to a lot of people in the legislature, and we particularly appreciated hearing that you and others as citizens step up to help their neighbors, step up to help their friends. Yeah. A lot of the legislation that's coming through about gun control, these red flag laws or whatever you want to call them, are not only limiting each person's ability to purchase, own, carry a firearm, but it's also limiting the ability of other people to be protected if they need to be protected.
Right. I could briefly mention the second story, which is a case where
Sure.
the person needed it. So when I teach classes, personal protection classes, I usually play an actual 911. I have a recording of a 911 call. And this is a woman who, again, she had a boyfriend who she decided to break off the relationship with. He was causing her trouble, had damaged her car, had done a bunch of stuff. She had a restraining order against them. But she was concerned for her safety, and a friend of hers was concerned for her safety. And earlier this day, he had lent her a handgun. And it turned out that same day, she had to use that handgun to defend herself. And given the circumstances, she would certainly have been dead if she hadn't had it. Oh. If there was a waiting period, again, that would not have been a legal thing to do. And this woman would have been dead because of that law.
The transfer of that firearm to her from the other person would not have been legal. If she would have used that firearm, she would have used that firearm illegally.
That's true, but the other thing is that, you know, the person who lent her the firearm, not wanting to break the law, might not have lent her the firearm.
Right.
In which case, you know, she would have been dead. Or if she were found to have the firearm, you know, before she actually had to use it, again, she could be charged and convicted of a crime for just wanting to protect her life.
You know, there's so many bad things that we've seen in many bills, not just the gun control bills, bad legislation that was written, legislation that was rushed. And I see particularly in the gun control legislation that's being offered as this being a national agenda. We don't really have a lot of that type of crime in our state.
No, New Hampshire is, is almost always in the bottom 3 states as far as the violent crime rate, and often the one with the lowest violent crime rate. There's many reasons for it, but one of them is likely the fact that many people in the state are armed. There have been interviews done with, people, criminals in prison who have committed burglaries. And what they found is that they're a lot more worried about an armed homeowner than the police. And, if they're going to steal something, break into someone's house and steal something, in New Hampshire they try, first of all, there's very little of that. And second of all, they make a real effort to make sure nobody's home because they know they're at risk if someone is home. And, while we don't want our things stolen, one thing that does is it actually does protect people because it's much more dangerous to have a criminal come into your home when someone's there than if it's empty. We don't want any crime at all, but we certainly don't want people harmed.
And having a firearm in your home, if you're trained how to use one properly, can certainly deter anybody who's breaking into your home.
It's not some magic talisman of protection,
right,
but it is a very effective tool. And just the fact that it's generally known that many people have firearms in their home and are prepared to defend themselves also acts as protection for the people who choose not to have firearms, because a criminal may not know whether or not they have one, and so they're more likely to leave them alone.
Well, Tony, we've run through the bills that we wanted to talk about for gun control. Thank you so much for spreading the knowledge to our viewers. Part of our program is letting our viewers understand the legislation that's coming through and having them have the ability to think about that and act on that with their representatives and or their senators by contacting them and giving them their point of view. We want to hear from our constituents and what they have to say about these types of bills that are coming through.
Yes, certainly constituents, Hudson and Pelham are welcome to contact me, my wife, or other representatives, and I'd like to thank you for what you're doing here.
Oh, thank you. You're very welcome. Before you leave here, I want to talk, we're going to switch out of this gun control legislation, and I want to talk about the Pelham GOP for a minute. John Spottiswoode can't be here today. they have an event that's going on at their home. So he asked me if I would give an update on the Pelham GOP, particularly about an event that happened there. Last weekend we had an event. Last Thursday of last week, wasn't on the weekend, it was on Thursday, we did a voter appreciation event where we sent out invitations, public invitations to the folks who voted for the entire 11-person slate that was elected into the legislature in our district. How'd you like the party?
It was a great event. A number of people put a lot of work into making it happen. We had a great turnout. Actually, all the legislators who were in town attended, and a lot of our constituents attended as well. And it was great to get to meet them and to have discussions and hear about what their interests were, what their concerns were, and to answer any questions they had. I had a lot of fun and really enjoyed it.
It was fun. We also had in attendance several past representatives that decided to stop in and say hello and support us, in which I found it very interesting that I got to talk to each one of them alone, and they gave me advice and they gave me kudos for doing a good job. And they've also said that they've been watching our voting records, and they're really happy with us because of our voting records. So it was a great event. The event was held at the Pelham VFW Hall, and we brought in food. People got to eat. There were drinks. There was dessert. There was a lot of dessert that was eaten. And we were able to sit down and talk with our constituents and let them know that we're there for them. And they were all really thrilled that there were 10 sitting state reps that were available to be there.
I mean, one of the advantages in New Hampshire of having a large house is that your representative should be just some person, normal person, who lives in your town, who's close to you, and that if you don't know them already, you can certainly get to know them and let them know your views. It's one of the great things about the New Hampshire system.
Well, it certainly was a good time, and we want to thank the members of the VFW for allowing us to have the event in their space. And we want to thank all of the folks who showed up to come and meet us and sit down and break some bread. The event was for the voters. It wasn't for us. It was for the voters as a thank you for doing their service by going to the polls and voting to put us in office. And I hope that we can have more events like this going forward. We do have Pelham Old Home Day that's coming up in September, so you'll see some things coming out on that. And John Spottis will be back here next month to give us an update of other events that are going to be happening not only in Pelham but through the county and the state. So with that, thanks a lot for being here. And we're going to be coming up with our next segment in just a few minutes. Miss Susan Olsen, I'm very excited about this piece. Well, we're back, and I'm really excited about this segment. Today we have Miss Susan Olsen with us, and Susan not only is a personal friend of mine, but she is also the director of legislation and advocacy for the Women's Defense League. Susan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. What a wonderful venue.
It's a pleasure for me to sit here and talk with you, not only because we are very dear friends, but because I really, truly believe in the mission of the Women's Defense League. Now, the Women's Defense League is a women's rights organization.
Yes, at its very core, it is a women's rights organization. And we didn't set out to construct it in that fashion, but it simply was, because what we do is seek to educate and empower women and empower them and give them knowledge on what their basic rights are. And we've spent the last 5 years doing that.
Now, teaching them what their basic rights are, I'm going to move right into this. This is basic rights where the Second Amendment is involved.
The Second Amendment certainly, but we stress the fact that this is our natural right of self-defense, which happily and fortunately are secured by the New Hampshire Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. Irrespective of those two documents, we have them in any event.
Now, the Women's Defense League focuses on training and education for women in the state for the proper use of a firearm.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Now tell us a little bit about how you guys go about doing this. Now, I know for a fact, because you and I just talked a little while ago, that the Women's Defense League has 19 certified instructors.
We do. We have NRA certified basic pistol instructors. We have rifle instructors. We have shotgun instructors. We have reloading instructors. We have pepper spray instructors. And we also have a cadre of certified range safety officers.
That's so impressive. And these people who are certified, these are women who are teaching women.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
And I think that the way that you look at this is the way that I look at it anyway, being a man, I look at this organization as giving a woman a certain type of comfort level to be able to be instructed by another woman who is very well educated and very well poised and certified in the proper use of firearms. Do you agree that in a lot of cases, a woman teaching a woman makes it go a lot easier for them?
Well, I would like to think it does. We've had many students who've come to us who said, well, you know, my father taught me, or my brother, or my husband, or my boyfriend, and sometimes they can expect me to know things that they've known all their lives. So when you don't start from absolute basics and a clean slate, I think that having a woman instructor, and there's also this arm's length between the student and the instructor, where there might be a familial or an emotional connection somewhere else. So it's truly a teacher-student sort of situation. Also, we tend to take into account our absolute physical differences, which are size, weight, center of gravity, appendages, age, all of these things that make us a little bit different. So we find that women teaching women has really been successful, and we've taught, gosh, I'd say upwards of 1,000 women of various ages.
That is so impressive.
From 13, the daughters or granddaughters of our members who've come to us, to a lovely woman who drove up from Massachusetts who's 81.
Oh my
so
goodness.
we sort of cover the whole range.
That's awesome. That is just awesome. Now, the Women's Defense League puts on many different types of events. And I've attended some public events. I know that you have some private events as well. Let's talk about some of the public events first. Recently, in the past couple of months, there was a big rally that was held in front of the State House. And the Women's Defense League was in charge of this rally.
It was our 5th one. We've been doing it every year. It's just for some reason this year caught the public's attention. I think the timing of the rally, just a few days after the House Bill 696 was introduced, maybe made people pay a little bit more attention. But we've been doing it for years.
I had a wonderful time at that rally, and attendance was big.
Huge.
It was huge.
Huge.
It seems that sometimes in past years, the climate doesn't seem to want to cooperate with us when this event is held. We've had snow and we've had rain and we've had all serious conditions, but people still came out and supported the event. This year it was a bluebird day.
It's perfect.
It was just beautiful, and we had a really good time, and there were many stories that were told during the course of this event.
Yes, there were.
Now, a couple of those stories we're going to talk about here in just a minute. I'm doing a little lead-in to some of our conversation here. Earlier in the program, I spoke about the pearls that are hanging around my neck. You also have pearls that are hanging around your neck, and these pearls are a symbol for the Women's Defense League. Tell me about how pearls came into being a symbol for the Women's Defense League?
And come into being is exactly the phrase. They have become a symbol for us. Early on, as the Director of Legislation, you might imagine I'm at the State House testifying or sitting in on hearings or exec sessions or absolute sessions. And one of the things that my mother taught me is you dress appropriately for the occasion. And I've been wearing pearls since I was a senior in high school. So my entire professional career has always found me, if I am in business clothes or church clothes, I have on a string of pearls. So I always wore them at the State House, and nobody thought anything about them. And one particular day, it was the big hearing in Reps Hall on sort of the first round of constitutional carry. And I was there, as were a number of the board members and officers from the Women's Defense League. And by accident, or maybe by background, I don't know, almost everyone was wearing some form of pearls, a necklace, a bracelet, one or two strands, whatever, maybe just earrings. And we, of course, were sitting together, and sort of back and to our left, dressed in red T-shirts, which I find very disrespectful for a legislative session, were members of the Women's Demand Action Group, which is a New York-based organization that hates guns. Mm-hmm. So they were sort of watching us, and we weren't paying much attention to them. But afterwards, the only television station in New Hampshire chose to interview one of the ladies from the Moms Demand Action, who spoke of being terrified by those women in pearls.
Oh my goodness.
And which was just sort of odd. But nevertheless, she said, I felt like I was in front of a firing squad.
My goodness.
Oh my goodness, yes. And she refused to give her name on camera, which is fine. But a few days after that, someone, I don't know who it was, I don't remember who it was, but said, gee whiz, I did not know that you folks were wearing assault pearls.
Assault pearls.
Assault pearls, right, okay? So, be that as it may, we didn't think too much about it. We continue to carry on in professional clothing and pearls, and I always wear them. And in fact, these are my late mother's, which I've rarely am without. But this year, at the hearing in Reps Hall for House Bill 696, the big boss lady of Moms Demand Action, Shannon Watts, was flown in on her broom by Mr. Bloomberg and his folks, and of course, the lobbyists had poured a lot of money into her appearance there and persuading legislators. And many of our state representatives with whom we've worked for years, mm-hmm. we've given them strings of pearls over the years, and they wear them as a show of support. We also have distributed lapel pins, mm-hmm. because we
I have one on.
We're very glad you do. And so a number of the representatives seated at the front of the table down there in Reps Hall were wearing pearls in support of the Women's Defense League. Well, Ms. Watts decided that this was an affront and an assault on every woman who'd ever lost a child or whatever, and every pearl, and took after them. And I think it was because she's afraid to come after us. Who would ever think that women would stand up to other women who have a different point of view? And to this day, she has failed to confront us. She picks on men, which I think is very cowardly.
And she also doesn't do this to anyone's face.
Oh, no. No.
She does this as a soundbite behind an audio clip or as a soundbite behind a television camera after she's left any type of situation.
And probably accompanied by armed guards. So, yeah, it's a very cowardly, shallow thing, but it's easy for people to just sort of pick up on that and the emotion of it. And
now, I will say this as a legislator. I'm so excited when the Women's Defense League is on campus, on the State House campus, when you're in the Legislative Office building attending hearings, whether it has to do with firearms on school campuses or protective orders or whatever it is, and you are giving a point of view and testimony to that committee who needs to hear that point of view. You do offer to hand out pearls to people that you know and that want to support the Women's Defense League
Yes.
in both its purpose for being a women's rights organization and its purpose for being an instructional organization to assist women in learning how to use a firearm properly.
Well, much like these horrible red T-shirts, us sitting in a hearing in the audience, in the cheap seats, wherever we might be, for a legislator to be able to see people in the audience, whether it's with pearls or any other sort of manifestation, they can see the composition of the audience, because not everybody gets up and speaks, not everybody submits written testimony, but it's nice to know the company that you keep for the good and the bad. So it's a useful visual symbol too. We also have those wonderful green, teal actually is the correct term, stickers that we bring as well. So we think it's important for people to know who we are, what we believe, and where we stand.
And to allow the legislators that are on the committee to look in the crowd and see the type of support in whichever area it is,
Yes.
to know that there's a percentage of people that are in this audience that are here to make a statement that means something.
Correct.
Now, I want to talk about these pearls just a bit longer for a minute, because there were several people that were in this hearing that we were just referring to that were sitting on the committee that were wearing the pearls, men and women alike, and that was in support of the Women's Defense League.
Yes.
That's the only reason why we wear these pearls, because we're supporting you guys.
Yes.
Now, I have been wearing pearls around the state legislature all session.
And we thank you.
Because I support the Women's Defense League and their efforts in empowering women. I do want to say that a false narrative was created by this outside group, that not only was it a false narrative, but it went viral across the United States and globally, because BBC picked it up as well, saying that the male legislators, not the female, they didn't bring her into it.
No, they didn't.
That the male legislators were mocking them by wearing the pearls while they were in committee.
That's just ridiculous. But aside from just that mocking statement that they made, they incited such hatred and violence against these legislators that many of them became frightened. Their families were threatened, their children were threatened because of a simple statement of support that this woman, Ms. Watts, decided to twist into just the most disgusting political baloney that you can imagine.
It is ashamed that the false narrative, that the lie was created, and that the money that was behind the lie was able to purport that lie out so quickly. Within 2 days, it was basically playing in every state in the nation. And these legislators, of which are personal friends of mine, colleagues of mine, also personal friends and colleagues of yours, who were threatened at their homes. They received horrible, vile phone calls threatening their lives, threatening their families' lives. Even their wives and their children were put at risk, and all over a lie.
Yes.
All over a lie. And that's how powerful this negative media is, that is just spread. It's just spread. When the BBC picks up a story like this, you know that it's big news, because it's made it across the pond. Now, we continue to wear our pearls.
And we bought more. Just so you know.
That's good, and I hope they get handed out as well.
They're going to be.
We continue to wear our pearls in support, and I continue to wear my Women's Defense League pin in support. I do that when I'm sitting on committee, I do that when I'm in session, and I do that sometimes when I'm just running around town. And people ask me, why are you wearing pearls? I said, have you ever heard of the Women's Defense League? Look it up on the internet. I think that you guys do a wonderful job.
Thanks.
Now, there's been a couple of bad things that have happened to you personally because of situations like this. The most recent situation, and I'm going to start this out and I'm going to let you finish it up, because I want to make sure that I don't put any words in here that aren't true. You were attending a gun legislation committee hearing, and one of the many gun legislation committee hearings that have happened. And while you were there, something happened that could be considered a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to briefly tell me the story. If you, I know it's a big story, but if you can give me an overview of what exactly happened to you, and we'll talk about where we're going with that from there.
It was at the exec session for House Bill 687, the Extreme Risk Protection Order hearing in criminal justice. Second week of March, maybe, I think it was. And it was a very lengthy hearing, and because of the executive committee, there were so many amendments that had been brought forward to the bill. There was so much bad information about the bill that even Democrat legislators seated on the committee stated that it was so confusing that in good conscience, they didn't believe they had enough information to vote in support of the bill. The bill was brought up for a vote, and it was voted inexpedient to legislate by a majority, and then there was a motion made to retain the bill. And to retain the bill, the intent, if it were the second year of the session, the bill would be considered dead. But the idea was ostensibly to look at the bill, try to figure out the various amendments, what in fact it said, sort of like Nancy Pelosi says we have to pass it before we can know what's in it. Well, these legislators took the time and were serious enough to say, we really need to understand this before we can make an informed vote. Regardless of the side, regardless of yes or no, they want to be informed, and that's a legitimate vote. The vote to retain was unanimous, 20-0. And the prime sponsor, I mean, we've been in bad votes before, right?
Yeah, oh yes, absolutely.
But that was a public humiliation. And I can imagine how she felt. I really can. So the session was breaking up. It was the last bill heard that morning, and the session was breaking up. And I'd packed up my camera and my briefcase, and I was going to thank one of the legislators for his vote. And I was waiting to sort of get closer to the committee table, watching the legislator, when all of a sudden I get shoved, and I'm being polite, into that hearing table. And I turned around to look, and looking at me with a smile was the bill's prime sponsor, Deborah Altschiller.
She shoved you.
Yes. Yes, she did. And then went on to exit through the committee office. As you know, you can exit
Right.
through the back door and then out into the hallway. And she looked at me, I think, to let me know, wanted me to make sure that I knew who it was. And I'm thinking, okay, I've been through this before, right? And I just wasn't going to do anything about it. And as I'm exiting through the public doors out into the hallway, I was heading to meet a colleague afterwards. I walk out, and there's a whole clutch of these people in support of 696, along with the representative. And there was no way to get to the next committee hearing room without passing by them. And as I'm passing by, and I went to say, Representative Altschiller, there's no need, there's no excuse for physical violence.
Right.
And before I could finish that, she almost knocked me off my feet. And I thought, well, gee.
Now this is a sitting state representative.
Yes.
An elected.
Actually, she was standing.
But an elected.
Yes.
Legislator.
Yes.
From the Democratic Party.
Yes.
That gave you an unwanted touch.
That's a nice way to put it, yes.
Okay, but our state law says that any unwanted touch can be considered assault.
It's called unprivileged contact.
Okay.
Yes, and that's a misdemeanor assault. Could be A or B, depending on how if you're hurt or the degree to which you're hurt. And so I moved on past. I was not knocked down. It was a crowded hallway anyway. And so I went directly over to one of the benches, set my gear down, I called State House Security and reported it. And the chief says, what would you like, do you want to make a complaint? And I said, yes, I do. So I went over to the State House and met the state police in the basement near, you know where the handicap entrance is?
Yep.
Back there, their offices, and I sat down with two lovely young state troopers who took my statement. And, you know, did I have anything else I wanted to say? Did they have any questions? And then it was incumbent upon them, because it was State House property, and it was a crime, that they would do the investigation and make a determination as to whether or not there was sufficient evidence to prosecute. So I went on about my business and stayed in touch as best I could, because I had no rights in that. It was their job to make the determination.
To do the determination.
As well they should.
Right.
As well they
That's
should.
their job.
Yes. So I get a call not long after that on a Sunday from a trooper who says, due to the political nature of the charge, would you mind to come in and speak with us again? And I said, well, okay, of course not. I took my attorney with me. I had an attorney this time. And went in to speak with them and went over everything all over again. They showed me some video and some still photography. I didn't know there were cameras in the LOB.
There are.
There are. There are. And so they showed me the video and the stills that they had taken from that time period, because it was very easy to determine the time frame on the tapes. And we went through all of that, and then they said, well, this is, you know, we're going to continue. We've interviewed 2 of the witnesses already. We've yet to interview Ms. Altschiller, and that was, I guess, going to be their next step. So I didn't hear anything, and I'm back and forth, and I finally send them an email and say, I really would like to know the status, because I'd like to obtain copies of the video and the still photographs and, of course, the statements. And was told, well, can you give me a call, and I'll give you an update. And I did. And I was told that an arrest warrant was drawn up for Ms. Altschiller and was taken to the Concord District Court, but the clerk declined to sign it, and that was sort of that.
Now, I'm not sure where the law sits on what a clerk's responsibility and or authority is over an arrest warrant. I know that their signature has to be on it, but can they deny that legally?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and of course I'm in consultation with mine. So I followed up an email confirming what I had just been told, and asked for the documents, the video, and the still photography, and was told, well, you'll have to file a right to know request.
Okay.
Which I did.
Okay. We know how to do those things. I've filed a right to know request before myself.
So have I, many of them.
Yep.
And was told by the attorney at the Department of Safety, fellow in the commissioner's office, it would take about 3 weeks. Well, an article got published this week talking about that and showing the emails back and forth. Well, I get an email last night at 4:45, and it said, we're done. There's nothing to see. The case is closed. Now, where does that leave me? I don't know. So I'm talking to my attorney.
Well, I think in the 91A, they were probably supposed to provide something to you other than the case is closed.
Yes, you're supposed to say the basis on which things are denied, but it's a funny thing, because this very same attorney is the one who handed over all of the documents in the Catherine Rogers case to me.
Which is what I was going to talk to you about next. Now, before we go on to that, they say this case is closed,
yes,
but you are still in conference with your attorney.
Of course.
And there was evidence
yes,
that this happened.
I just don't think the state police frivolously or loosely draw up arrest warrants, particularly for a sitting state representative whose spousal unit is the executive editor of a big newspaper.
Right.
I'd want to be pretty sure that I was on solid ground,
But
because these gentlemen do their job.
But all of a sudden, there's nothing to talk about.
No.
Well, we're going to watch this story and see what unfolds.
I'll keep you posted.
Personally, I am so sorry that happened to you. Something else like this happened to you once before, not it wasn't at the State House.
No, it was at the archives at a Senate vote recount.
And another Democratic state representative,
Anti-gun.
anti-gun,
Yeah.
also assaulted you.
Yes.
Now, for the people that are out there that don't know about this, number one, you're one of the most pleasant people that I know.
Aren't you nice?
You are very, very knowledgeable about the legislation that you take on to advocate for or against, and you do it in a very professional manner. You're also tough as a boot, and I know that because we come from the same state.
Yes,
we
do.
We were raised that way, to be tough. And I think that sometimes that could be intimidating to people because we actually know how to stand up for ourselves. You were in a recount,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened to you in this area where you were providing service to the recount?
Seated at a table of 4, which is standard procedure, 2 representatives from the Secretary of State's office and a representative for each of the candidates who were involved in the recount. I was a representative for the Republican candidate, and Catherine Rogers was a representative for the Democrat candidate. And there were 17 votes involved in a Senate race, which is pretty big. Mm-hmm. So every vote mattered, every single vote mattered. And if you haven't been to a recount, the process is the representatives from the Secretary of State's office open the boxes. It's a very tightly controlled procedure.
It should be, yeah.
And present to the 2 representatives each ballot. And each representative has the opportunity to say, well, gee, I'm not clear how that was marked, or is it torn or spoiled in some fashion. And each representative has the right to challenge the validity of that
Because
ballot.
the law says
Yes.
that the ballots have to be filled out in a certain way.
Yes, they're supposed to be filled out.
They're supposed to be filled out in a certain
Intent,
way,
yes.
and the intent of the vote must be
Clear.
clear.
Yes.
And if there's a challenge to the intent, then there's a separate process that happens
Yes.
with that.
Yes.
Now, you guys were doing the vote counts.
Yes, and we had just started. In fact, it was the first box of the morning, and so the gentlemen from the Secretary of State's office were putting the ballots out, and Ms. Rogers was challenging them, set it aside, set it aside. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm not seeing something here clearly because I didn't see the issue for the challenge, and I asked the fellas to maybe put them a little closer in the center so I could get a good look and, just make an informed choice. I'm not saying she was wrong, but I didn't see the reasons for it.
You also had the right to see the ballot.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course. You can't touch them, but you can look at them. So after I had said that to the gentleman, she turns to me like she's gonna hug me and say, we're just gonna do whatever makes you happy. And she turns to me and clocks me on the side of the head. Yeah, that's exactly what, well, I didn't do that. I stood up. It was an instinct. I stood up and I said if she touched me again, I'd have her
shocking.
arrested. I was shocked.
I bet.
And all of a sudden, I'm standing there and I'm looking around going,
Did this lady just hit me?
so I sat down thinking, we're here to do something. And sat down and she leans into me and she says, hit me. I know you want to hit me. She says, no, what you want to do, you want to shoot me. And I'm just kind of going, well, and I didn't say anything. And so we finished that box and she sort of left. And we finished the day and ultimately the Republican won, which was the reason we were there. And not long after that, I went to see the speaker, the former speaker, and tell him what happened and tell him that I intended to press charges, but that I wanted to be respectful of the session and the intent of the session and not to make this political, and that I would wait till the end of the session, which I almost did until the whole debacle with Ms. Frost and the Miss Andre representatives. So I went and filed a complaint. And then her attorney comes out and accuses me of being political, and that was the mistake. She denied it, of course, and when he came out and started saying things, an unimpeachable witness contacts me. Says, Susan, I didn't want to get involved, but this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a statement to the police, the state police, and ultimately she had to plead guilty because I don't think they wanted it to go to court.
So a warrant was issued?
No, gosh,
Just
no,
charges
just
were
charges,
filed.
just
Charges were filed with no warrant.
Yes,
But she did have to go to court.
she did, and I was there.
And-
And so was Ray Buckley, and so was Stephen Shurtleff, and so was Dan Eaton, and so was Timothy Horrigan and Cindy Rosenwald, all with pom-poms, not really, but in support. And I was there by myself with a camera.
And the verdict was?
She pled guilty.
She pled guilty.
And she was sentenced to a year of probation. She was remanded to anger management classes, and any fine was dismissed. So I waited a while and went to the court to see if she had completed her sentence, and nobody can find out. Nobody knows.
If she ever took her anger management classes?
This very same lawyer says, well, I can find no evidence.
Oh my goodness.
And we're done again.
Now, to me, this makes me think that you are sort of a targeted person by the Democratic side, because they've
Seems
had-
sort of cowardly. I'm an old lady.
Well, but you're a person with a voice, and they don't like that.
Probably not.
They don't like people with a voice, and it seems to me that they could not be violent, but they are.
Yes, and I don't know why. I don't understand that. I really don't.
Well, you know, we're going to continue to follow these two cases because we know that people have been looking into whether or not the representative from the vote count has actually taken her anger management classes. And your attorney is still working on whether or not something is going to happen with Representative Altschiller.
Yes, whether I've exhausted all my remedies. And that's where we are. And because you and I and most of our folks are law-abiding citizens, we follow the law.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So that's what I'm doing.
Well, I want to tell you that these stories, shocking, and I think it's important that if our viewers do not know that things like this happen, I want them to know that things like this happen.
It's a shame.
And it's a shame that it happens. But I also want to say thank you for being the strong person that you are and for standing up not only for the rights of women, but you also stand up for the rights of all of us.
Thanks.
And you have a little protective edge over me because we're great friends.
Yes.
And I appreciate you so much for coming and telling that story to our viewers today on this program.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Just be mindful that there are bad guys in the world, and things happen, and sometimes they happen when you're least prepared.
Well, you know that I stand strong with you, and that there are many other people out there that stand strong with you. I want to tell the viewers, if you want to learn more about the Women's Defense League, a link to that website will be provided at the end of the tape on the show. So just as we provide links to other areas, the Women's Defense League will be out there as well. And if you're interested in, if you're a woman who is interested in learning how to use a firearm, or you may think that you want to just brush up on some skills, or you may just want to have some comradeship with other women that believe in the use of firearms, that believe in protecting themselves, contact the Women's Defense League because they're a great organization that empowers women and allows them to feel protected with themselves and protected around others. Thank you so much for being on our program.
Oh, thank you.
Next month, we're going to bring back more legislation talk. We have a busy month coming up here. We have vetoes that are going to be coming out. We have the final budget decisions are going to be coming out. So be sure and stay tuned. Enjoy this program and enjoy the next one. We will see you again next month.
We'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to today's program. Each month, we'll bring you new information about legislation that's being proposed in our state capitol. If you'd like to find us or comment on our program, contact us on Facebook at Granites Edge. We also have a YouTube channel by the same name. Links that were mentioned in our program today will be listed there for your convenience. Tune in next time to Granite's Edge.